Okay, so you know how everyone's always talking about happiness, right? Like, how can we actually be happier? And more importantly, can we be happy, like, for good? I mean, is lasting happiness even a real thing, or is that just something they put in movies?
It's funny you should say that because that's exactly where this whole research area kind of kicked off. Like the very first work on this topic literally came from a grant from the National Institute of Mental Health. And it was all about testing out different ways to increase happiness. Like they were literally running experiments.
Oh, really? So they were skeptical too, huh?
Totally. They weren't sure if it was even possible to make lasting changes to people's happiness levels. But here's the thing. What they found, and what this book, The How of Happiness, really digs into, is that, yeah, you can actually become happier, like measurably happier.
That's amazing. But I bet it's not like you just snap your fingers and bam, you're happy forever.
Not quite. I mean, it would be nice if it were that easy. But the truth is it takes work. You got to be willing to put in the effort to make it happen. And you got to be consistent with it.
Okay, so no magic pill then.
Yeah, no magic pill, unfortunately. And another thing that might surprise you is you don't need to go digging through your entire childhood or spend years on a therapist's couch to find happiness.
I think that's a relief to hear for a lot of people because
Yeah.
there's this idea out there that you have to like unpack all your baggage before you can even start to be happy.
Yeah, and that's just not what the research shows. And it's not about getting that next promotion or finally buying your dream house either.
Yeah.
Those things might make you happy for a bit, but it doesn't last.
It's kind of like when you buy a new gadget. You're super excited about it for a few weeks, but then it's just another thing, you know?
Exactly. And the good news is the effort you put into being happier actually becomes less over time as you build those habits. It's like working out. At
Mhm.
first it's hard, but then your body gets used to it.
I like that analogy. So it's more about building a lifestyle than achieving a specific goal.
Exactly. And there are tons of examples of people who thought external stuff would make them happy, but it didn't. Like there's this rock star, Neil, who had all the fame and fortune you could imagine, but he actually felt the same level of happiness, even after he lost a bunch of his money.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's like external stuff just doesn't move the needle that much in the long run.
Right. And there was this woman, Denise, who was on that show, Extreme Makeover. She got all this cosmetic surgery, and even though she said it was nice to look younger, it didn't actually make her happier. She even said, the makeover is nothing compared to real happiness.
That's pretty powerful. It really shows that real happiness comes from within.
Totally. And that actually brings us to something called the 40% solution. It's
Hmm.
a way of understanding what actually determines your happiness. It turns out about 50% is genetic. It's like your happiness set point, the level you naturally tend to return to.
Hmm. So some people are just naturally more inclined to be happy.
It seems that way. And then only about 10% is due to your life circumstances. So things like wealth, health, relationships, where you live, all that stuff.
Seriously. Only 10%. We put so much emphasis on those things.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? But that means the remaining 40% is where the magic happens.
Right.
That 40% is based on your intentional activities and the things you choose to do.
Okay, so that's where we have the power to make a difference. That's pretty exciting. So what are some of the things that happy people tend to do?
Well, they spend time nurturing their relationships with family and friends. They make an effort to express gratitude regularly. They help others. They practice optimism. They savor the little things in life. They exercise regularly. They have long-term goals. And they deal with stress and tough times in healthy ways.
It's quite a list, but it's all stuff that's actually within our control. It's not like winning the lottery or something.
Right. And you see this focus on well-being at a bigger level too, like with Bhutan. Their king actually decided that gross domestic happiness was more important than gross domestic product. So their whole country is focused on the well-being of its citizens.
That's amazing. And it makes you think maybe we could learn a thing or two from them, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So going back to those external things we talked about, like where you live, there's this study that compared life satisfaction in the Midwest and California. And guess what? There was no difference in overall happiness.
Wow. So even though everyone thinks Californians must be happier because of the weather, it's not actually true.
Nope. And it's because of this thing called adaptation. We get used to things, even good things. Like when you first get married, you're super happy, but over time you adapt to it, and that initial high fades.
I guess that's why it's so important to keep putting effort into your relationships and appreciate what you have.
Exactly. There's this great example in the book of two guys, Marcus and Roland, who both got married. Marcus kept investing in his relationship and stayed really happy. But Roland kind of took things for granted and ended up less happy over time. It shows that you got to keep nurturing those positive things in your life.
So what about people who maybe have a lower happiness set point naturally? Like what if they're starting from a more difficult place?
Well, there's this really inspiring story of a woman named Judith. She probably had a lower set point and had a lot of tough stuff happen in her life. But she decided to actively change her thinking, build her self-esteem, and become more optimistic. And it totally worked. She was able to increase her happiness even though she was dealing with a lot.
That's such a powerful message of hope. It shows that even if you're starting from a tough spot, you can still choose to be happier.
Totally. And the book goes into a bunch of specific activities you can do to boost your happiness. I want to dive into some of those.
Absolutely. Let's start with gratitude. It seems like everyone's talking about gratitude these days. What's the big deal?
Well, gratitude is way more than just saying thank you. When you practice gratitude regularly, you actually become happier overall. You feel more energetic, more hopeful, and experience way more positive emotions.
So it's not just a feel-good thing, it has real benefits.
Yeah, for sure. Grateful people are also more helpful and empathetic. They tend to be more spiritual or religious, more forgiving, and less materialistic. And here's the kicker. They're less likely to be depressed, anxious, lonely, envious, or neurotic.
Wow, that's a pretty impressive list. It's like gratitude is some kind of superpower.
It kind of is. And what's even cooler is that gratitude creates this upward spiral. The more grateful you are, the stronger your relationships become, and then you have even more to be grateful for. It's a beautiful cycle.
I love that. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. And it reminds me of the story in the book about a student named Nicole who wrote a gratitude letter to her mom. Just writing that letter made her feel incredibly happy and even teary-eyed.
It's amazing how powerful simply expressing gratitude can be. Have you ever tried something like that?
Hmm. Not a letter specifically, but I definitely make an effort to tell people I appreciate them. Okay, so next up, optimism. Is this about being all sunshine and rainbows and ignoring the bad stuff?
Not really. It's more about choosing to see the world in a more positive light. It's about focusing on the good things and believing that good things will happen.
But doesn't that make you naive?
Actually, optimists are often more aware of risks than pessimists. They just choose to believe that they can overcome those risks, and they understand that good things usually require effort. They don't just sit back and expect things to fall into their laps.
So it's not about denying reality, it's about choosing to see the good even when things are tough.
Yeah, and there's this idea of flexible optimism, which is basically knowing when to be optimistic and when to be more realistic. You got to have a balance.
Okay, that makes sense. What about this whole thing about overthinking and comparing ourselves to others? I think we're all guilty of that sometimes.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the research shows that overthinking is super bad for you. It makes you sadder, keeps you stuck in negative thoughts, makes it harder to solve problems, kills your motivation, and even messes with your concentration.
Ooh. It's like overthinking is a happiness killer.
It totally is. And all that time you spend replaying stuff in your head, it rarely leads to any real insights. It's mostly just wasted energy.
And then there's the whole social comparison thing. With social media, it's like everyone's life looks perfect all the time.
Right. And it's so easy to fall into the trap of comparing yourself to others and feeling bad. But here's the thing. Happy people don't really do that. They judge their own success based on their own values, not on what other people are doing.
So they're not constantly trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Nope. And what's really interesting is that happy people can actually be happy for other people's successes. They don't get jealous or feel threatened.
Now, that's a quality I'd love to have more of. Okay, so this next one seems pretty straightforward. Acts of kindness. It feels good to be kind, but is there actual science behind it?
Totally. Being kind actually makes you happier. It makes you see others in a more positive light, it strengthens your relationships, and it makes you appreciate your own good fortune more.
It's like when you do something nice for someone, you get a little boost yourself.
Exactly. And when you're focused on helping others, you're less focused on your own problems, which can be a big relief. There's this great study about women with multiple sclerosis who became peer supporters for others with the same condition. Even though they were going through their own challenges, helping others actually made them feel happier, more capable, and less depressed.
That's incredible. It really shows that giving can be just as beneficial as receiving.
And this brings us to another big one, social relationships. It's pretty obvious that having good relationships makes you happier, but how important is it really?
Well, it seems pretty fundamental, right? Like we're social creatures, we need connection.
You got it. Good social relationships fulfill so many of our basic needs, and they create this amazing upward spiral where the happier you are, the better your relationships become and vice versa.
So it's like a happiness multiplier.
For sure. And if you look at groups of people who are known for being both long-lived and happy, like the Okinawans and the Seventh-day Adventists, one thing they all have in common is strong social connections.
So family and community are key.
Big time. And on the flip side, bad relationships can really mess you up. They can lead to depression, anxiety, and even physical health problems.
Yikes. That's a good reminder to invest in the relationships that are good for you and maybe distance yourself from the ones that aren't.
So true. Now, in terms of improving your relationships, there are a few things you can do. One is to make a conscious effort to express admiration, appreciation, and affection. And a good rule of thumb is to aim for 5 positive interactions for every negative one.
So it's like you got to overpower the bad stuff with good stuff.
Yeah. And don't underestimate the power of just telling people what you admire about them and how much you appreciate them. It can really make a difference.
Especially in long-term relationships where it's easy to take each other for granted. It's so true. And when your loved ones share good news with you, no matter how small, be enthusiastic and supportive. It shows you care about their happiness.
Okay, now what about those inevitable disagreements? Do happy couples just never fight?
Well, no, they definitely still disagree sometimes. But the difference is they handle conflict in a healthier way. They avoid blaming and criticizing each other, and they don't shut down or get defensive.
So it's more about how you fight than how often you fight.
Exactly. And for friendships, be there for your friends when they need you, be trustworthy, listen well, share about yourself, give them space when they need it, and don't be afraid to tell them how much you care.
And don't forget those hugs.
Oh yeah, those are important too. The research actually suggests that getting at least 5 hugs a day can be really good for you.
5 hugs a day. I like the sound of that. Okay, so now let's talk about something a bit heavier. Stress and trauma. How do happy people deal with the tough stuff? This is where the concept of post-traumatic growth comes in. It's basically the idea that going through really tough experiences can actually lead to positive changes.
Wait, so trauma can actually make you stronger?
In a way, yeah. People who've experienced trauma often report a greater appreciation for life, stronger relationships, a sense of new possibilities, and even spiritual growth.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's like finding the silver lining in the darkest of clouds.
So there are a few things that can help you cope with trauma. One is to try to find some meaning in the experience, even if it's hard. Another is to write about your feelings and reactions.
So journaling can be really helpful.
You can. And it's important to focus on the potential for growth after a loss. Consider how the experience might have positively impacted your relationships, even in subtle ways.
It's like looking for those little seeds of hope.
Exactly. And there's this technique called thought disputation, where you basically challenge your negative thoughts. It's a way to reframe things in a more positive light.
So it's about taking control of your thoughts instead of letting them control you.
And then there's forgiveness. Now, this isn't about condoning what happened or saying it was okay. It's about letting go of the anger and resentment for your own sake.
So forgiveness is really an act of self-care.
Totally. And the research shows that forgiveness can actually reduce anxiety and boost self-esteem. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about something called flow.
Flow, like going with the flow.
Kinda. Flow is that feeling of being completely absorbed in something you're doing. Like you're so focused and engaged that you lose track of time and everything else fades away.
Oh yeah, I totally get that. Like when you're working on a project you love and you just get completely lost in it.
Exactly. And flow is super beneficial for your happiness. It's enjoyable, it gives you a sense of accomplishment, and it motivates you to keep doing whatever it is you're doing.
It's like a natural high.
It is. And the cool thing is to stay in flow, you have to keep challenging yourself, which leads to growth and mastery. And even work can be a source of flow if you view it as a career or a calling rather than just a job.
So finding work you're passionate about is key.
It definitely helps. Now let's talk about savoring.
Savoring, like savoring a delicious meal.
Pretty much. It's about paying attention to the good stuff in your life and really appreciating it. It's about anticipating positive experiences, being mindful in the moment, and remembering those good times later.
So it's like actively soaking up all the good vibes.
Exactly. And sharing those good experiences with others makes them even better. There's this thing called mutual reminiscence, which is basically just sharing happy memories together. It's especially beneficial for older adults.
So reminiscing about the good old days is good for you.
It is. And even just thinking back on happy memories by yourself can boost your mood, reinforce your identity, and give you a sense of comfort.
Now what about goals? How does setting and achieving goals contribute to happiness?
Well, research shows that pursuing goals that are meaningful to you makes you happier than just drifting through life aimlessly.
But doesn't achieving goals just make you want more and more? Like you're never satisfied.
Not necessarily. It's about choosing the right kind of goals. Goals that are intrinsic, authentic, and aligned with your values. And it's okay to be flexible and adjust your goals as you go.
So it's not about achieving some arbitrary standard of success. It's about pursuing things that are truly important to you.
And the types of goals we value can change as we age. When we're younger, we might be all about novelty and exploration, but as we get older, we might prioritize goals that are more emotionally meaningful.
So it's about finding what matters to you at each stage of life.
Absolutely. And there are things you can do to be more successful at achieving your goals, like making them specific, planning them out, anticipating obstacles, and seeking support from others. Now, this next topic can be a bit personal, but it's worth discussing: religion and spirituality.
I know this can be a touchy subject, but is there a connection between religion and happiness?
There seems to be. People who are actively involved in religion often report being happier, having more social support, finding more meaning in life, living longer with certain diseases, and having healthier habits.
So it's not just about believing in something, it's about being actively involved in a community.
Yeah, it seems that public participation in religious activities is more strongly linked to happiness than just private beliefs. And when people pursue religion for intrinsic reasons, like as a way of life, they tend to be happier.
So it's about finding something that truly resonates with you.
And even if you're not religious, the idea of seeking personal meaning and purpose is important for everyone's happiness. It's about figuring out what gives your life meaning.
Now let's talk about something we all know we should do more of: exercise.
Oh yeah, exercise is a huge one. It boosts your mood, your self-esteem, and your overall health. And it can give you those flow experiences we talked about earlier.
So it's like a triple whammy of goodness.
For sure. And some studies suggest that exercise can have similar effects on your brain as meditation. It reduces anxiety and increases those feel-good hormones.
So it's like a natural mood booster.
Totally. And the best part is you don't have to become a marathon runner to get the benefits. Just start slow, find something you enjoy, and make it a regular part of your routine.
Consistency is key.
Always. And speaking of good things, let's not forget about the power of positive emotions.
Positive emotions, so just feeling good.
Pretty much. But it's more than just a fleeting feeling. Positive emotions actually broaden your horizons, make you more open to new experiences, and help you build skills and resources over time.
So they have a ripple effect.
They do. And when you experience positive emotions regularly, you become more productive, more likable, more active, healthier, friendlier, more helpful, more resilient, and even more creative.
Wow, it's like positive emotions are the secret sauce to a good life.
They're definitely a key ingredient. And they can even make you see your life as more meaningful. Now, all this talk about happiness and goals and positive emotions, it can feel overwhelming sometimes. How important is it to have support from others on this journey?
I imagine it's pretty crucial, right? Like having people in your corner to cheer you on.
It's absolutely essential. Having a good support system, whether it's friends, family, or a group, can make a world of difference. It gives you motivation, guidance, and encouragement when you need it most.
So we're not meant to do this alone.
Nope. And studies have shown that people are way more likely to succeed at things like losing weight or sticking to their New Year's resolutions when they have social support.
So having a team makes a big difference.
It does. And ultimately, all of this comes down to your own motivation, effort, and commitment.
So it's not a passive thing, it's an active choice to be happier.
Exactly. You have to be willing to put in the work. And the more you do, the easier it gets over time.
Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on depression. Can these happiness strategies still help someone who's struggling with depression?
That's a really important question. And the research suggests that even though people with severe depression may need additional support, happiness-boosting activities can still be beneficial.
So they're not a cure-all, but they can be a helpful part of the journey.
Right. There's even a type of therapy called positive psychotherapy that focuses specifically on things like gratitude, savoring, and strengths. And it's been shown to be really effective at reducing depressive symptoms and increasing happiness, sometimes even more so than medication alone.
Wow. So there's real hope for people who are struggling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so to bring our deep dive to a close, the takeaway for you today is this: lasting happiness is achievable. And it's not just about luck or circumstance, it's about the choices you make and the actions you take.
So it's about taking control of your happiness, not waiting for it to happen to you.
And we've covered a ton of specific things you can start doing today to become happier. Cultivating gratitude, practicing optimism, ditching the overthinking, being kind, nurturing your relationships, coping with stress in healthy ways, finding flow, savoring the good stuff, setting meaningful goals, exploring your spirituality, exercising regularly, and embracing positive emotions. That's a lot, but even small steps in these areas can make a big difference.
So it's about finding what works for you and building it into your life little by little.
Exactly. And as you do that, you'll start to experience those upward spirals, where one positive change leads to another and another.
So our final thought for you is this. What's one small step you can take today to start creating your own upward spiral of happiness? What's one thing you can do to move towards a happier, more fulfilling life? It's an exciting question to ponder.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts, so if you're feeling inspired, share your ideas with us in the comments.